Welcome to the Magenta Otter Travels channel and the final installment in the Britain Love Stories series. In this episode, we will be talking about the Ian and Dara story. So, before we get started, I need to ask everyone to do me a favor. Go to the comments and just say hi, hello, here, something, because that's how we know who watched this video. Kind of think of it as signing the guest book in our wedding anniversary party, because this video will be premiering on our 28th wedding anniversary. We're going to tell you the story of how we met and our courtship. The story really begins in the early 80s. I went to the World Fair with my parents and my brother Brian and his family in Tennessee. I think it was 1984. I'll have to check that date. But anyway, I remember going to exhibits from different countries around the world. And when we were standing in one of the long queues to get into the next exhibit, I remember telling my mother, when I get married, I'm going to marry a guy from like England or Australia or something because they have such cool accents. So the irony is, I found this awesome Englishman to marry who
doesn't have an accent.
No, sounds like he grew up in California.
Yeah.
Because he did. But actually, Ian, tell him where you were born. People always like hearing about this fun fact.
Yes, I was born in Kingston, Jamaica.
So Ian was born in Jamaica to British parents and immigrated to Northern California.
Yeah, probably about the time I was 4 years old, yeah.
Yeah. And where was the first place you lived?
Palo Alto.
Palo Alto, California, which is kind of funny because that's where I went to college many years later. So we have this intersection of our lives in Northern California, but we didn't meet until many, many years later in Southern California.
Yep, I was in high school when she was attending Stanford in Palo Alto.
He always likes to bring that up just to remind you that I'm older than him. So let the record show I'm older than Ian.
Only 20 months.
Yeah, by 20 months, which with as old as we are now, that's like completely insignificant amount of time. I remember first seeing Ian at a party at our friend Susie's house. It was a church party and they were playing games and things.
Mm-hmm.
And
I thought that Dara and her friends were very uppity.
Yeah. What was it? Because we were playing Taboo?
Yes.
I was wicked competitive when it came to Taboo, and the reason why is because I'm terrible at most games. I'm no good at strategy games. I really prefer games of luck because those are the only ones I have a chance at. Monopoly is like, I just hate it, and Risk, I hate it. Those are my boys' favorite games to play. So for some reason, I think I was a little bit good at Taboo just because I'm good at thinking on my feet. And so yeah, I was really competitive because there was a game I could actually do something with. So that was Ian's first impression of me.
Yep.
That I was snotty and competitive. But anyway, then we got to know each other a little bit better at church. Ian played the piano, you played the piano in church. Yeah. So that was very impressive to me, his musical talents. And then there was a Sadie Hawkins dance.
Yes.
So my friend Susie, whose house we met at that I mentioned earlier, my friend Susie and I, we came up with this plan where we were going to invite Ian and Tim to this Sadie Hawkins dance. So we did, and Ian said no. Rude. Why did you say no?
Just because work was crazy.
So
crazy busy with work.
Yeah, tell them where you were working.
I was working as an accountant at Price Waterhouse, and it was our busy season.
Yeah, so this was like late January, early February timeframe.
Yeah.
And that's like the worst time of year where you're working around the clock.
I definitely did have some interest in Dara at that point.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that did not go to plan. And then it was about a week or two later, it was Valentine's Day. I was working at Nestle in Glendale, California, the Nestle Foods headquarters. And I get a call from the receptionist that there's this gorgeous flower arrangement waiting for me downstairs. So I go get it, and it was this huge bouquet of magenta roses. Gorgeous display. And I'm like, wow. Well, this should have been really exciting and fun for me, but as my journal records, my my first emotion was anger because I had recently ended a long relationship a few months before, and so I wasn't dating anyone, and I couldn't think of anyone who I knew well enough who would have sent me these flowers. I think Ian doesn't remember why the roses were magenta. It actually was just dumb luck.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember when I was interrogating you about this later, what you said is that you had called your dad and had like asked advice. And you're like, oh, well, if I send red roses, that'll say like I'm in love with you. And so you wanted something that wasn't quite such a bold statement.
Right.
So you told the florist send pink roses.
Yeah.
And they could have been baby pink, but the florist just happened to choose magenta roses.
Yeah.
So that actually was a wrinkle that made this all much more complicated.
Yeah.
So then there was a Valentine's dance. I think Valentine's Day was on a Friday. So it was Friday, Valentine's Day. We had this big dance at church. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out who sent me these roses, because I basically had spent my entire work day on the phone calling everyone I could think of, trying to figure out who had sent me these roses, and got nowhere. So go to the dance, and I see Ian, and actually I had worked with you on putting together the music for that dance, because I think I was in charge of it, on a committee that was in charge of it. And that's where you gave me some Morrissey and Smith CDs, and I found out that you like that. So we found out we had a similar taste in music, all those 80s music. So Ian's appeal was definitely increasing at that point because I thought he liked cool music. But let the record show, I wasn't really romantically interested in Ian that much because I thought he was way too young, because Ian looked so young. And when you see our wedding pictures, which I'll have to like put those right here. When you see our wedding pictures, you'll see Ian looked like he was 14 years old. I mean, he clearly was at least 21 or 22.
I had braces at the time, so that definitely contributed to that whole image.
Anyway, so yeah, I just felt like an old lady compared to him. But anyway, so I thought he was cute, but I wasn't sure that I should be dating someone who was so much younger than me. Anyway, so we go to the dance, and we did dance some dances together, but you didn't really make it a point of dancing that many dances with me. I think you were, I remember you asking my friend Michelle to dance as much as you asked me. So again, I think he was playing hard to get. But then he also increased in his appeal because at the end of the dance, since I was in charge, I had to help clean up. So I was in the kitchen washing dishes for ages. And Ian is the kind of person who will help stick around and clean up and wash dishes in the kitchen. So he was there washing dishes with me. So we're side by side washing dishes. Do you remember what happened?
I don't remember.
Okay. So I had been wearing this red silk dress for the Valentine's party, and I definitely could not do cleanup in that. So I changed into my magenta sweatpants and some shirt. And so we're there washing dishes, and I say to Ian, because I'm trying to interrogate people like a detective show and figure out who had sent me those flowers. So I ask Ian, do you know what my favorite color is? Guess what my favorite color is? And he looks at my sweatpants and says, bright pink.
Okay.
So it was the right answer, but it looked like he was just making it up on the fly, looking at what I was wearing. So I'm like, ah! So my friend Michelle and I, after the dance was all over, we drive home, and I remember going to some all-night diner in Glendale at like 2 a.m. and sitting there with Michelle, just analyzing this to death, just tearing it down piece by piece. It's like one of those detective shows with like the photos of all of the suspects and the yarn connecting them all means motive opportunity. Who could have sent me these flowers? And at that point, I think I wanted it to be Ian, but he had done such an unconvincing job at the dance of acting like he liked me. And I'm like, I just don't know. So the next morning I wake up and I'm distraught and I'm crying and being all emotional about it. And then I have the clever, dramatic idea of thinking, and this, I've read my journal to remind myself about this. I had the clever idea of, I'm going to use these tears. I'm going to use them. So I call the florist, still like, with the break in my voice of tearful crying, saying, what my name was and that I received these flowers from them the day before, and I really needed to know who sent them. And so they said, well, and it was this teenage boy who answered the phone. He did not know what to do with this crying lady on the phone. So he's like, well, can you guess the name of who sent them? So I'm guessing all these names. By then, Ian, because of what had happened at the dance, I thought it probably wasn't him. So I didn't even guess his name. I guessed some other name. And he's like, nope, it's none of those. So then I full on started crying on the phone with this kid. And he's like, I'm going to have the manager call you back in 5 minutes. And so then he called Ian.
I remember sitting in my room on my bed and getting this call, and this person saying, there's this crazy distraught woman who's called us and she needs to know who had sent the flowers. Can we please let her know?
Yeah. Well, I think what he said is, you better call and tell her, because otherwise we're going to have to.
Yeah.
You were threatened.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for the manager of the florist to call me back, and I get a call from Ian. He's like, Dara? I'm like, Ian! I was so mad. I'm like,
I'm so mad at you.
Why didn't you just tell me last night the roses were from you? Anyway, and I think your excuse, do you remember what your excuse was?
I don't remember.
You were waiting until you weren't so busy at work.
Oh, okay.
I think you told your dad about this plan, and he's like, Ian, this is a bad plan. But yeah, you were waiting until you weren't so busy at work. And so anyway, well, at that point,
because, hey, I got to get her roses for Valentine's Day.
So at that point, you pretty much had to ask me out. So you asked me out, and we went out for our first date exactly 1 week after Valentine's Day. So we're sitting there at this restaurant in Pasadena, having our first date over dinner, and you told me that you had a cottage in England.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he dropped that little fact into the dinner conversation. So, right, I was just sold right there. Like, his approval rating went really high at that point.
She didn't know that the cottage was absolutely derelict with an outdoor toilet and wallpaper falling off the walls.
Yeah, a lean-to kitchen, outside toilet. Yeah, it was kind of an uninhabitable shack. So I'll put some pictures here of the cottage that we.
It was very ancient.
Yes, and it was sitting in a beautiful place.
Yeah,
it was in Herefordshire, right?
No, it was in Somerset.
Oh, it was in Somerset. In
Quantock Hills or something like that.
In a valley with, beautiful. Like, if you're in the dilapidated shack looking out over the valley, the view was lovely. It was up on a hill. But anyway, so yeah, I didn't know all the downsides of the dilapidated shack, but yeah, I heard about how he was a British citizen and his parents were British, and so I was starting to get very interested. I also found out that he wasn't as young as I thought. So things were starting to click, and then and after that, our courtship moved pretty quickly. It was 1992, which was a leap year, which tradition says that in a leap year, a woman can ask a man for his hand in marriage. So there was, do you remember the fax?
No.
I sent you a fax on, it's right here. I got out, to refresh our memory, I got out the photo album of Ian and Dara's first year together so that we could remember these things. And here it is. 3 weeks.
That's right.
Here's the date here on the top of the fax. March 27th.
1992. Ian, will you marry me?
Yeah, I'm going to hold this up to the camera. See? It's an engagement ring. I sent him a fax. Anyway, it was just a joke, but you know what? People joke around when they're half serious. So yes, as I saw, I'd recorded in my journal, we were dating. We were getting together like every day after work, and even though Ian was busy with work, we would like at least get together and have dinner and stuff. And we were seeing each other all the time, and our relationship was progressing. We were getting serious and talking about our future and things like that. And Ian used to say that we were on the accelerated program. Makes us sound like gifted students in grade school. Anyway, so on this accelerated program, being the very analytical people that we both were, he was an accountant and I was working in marketing, but dealing with data every day. So do you remember the percentages?
Yeah.
What do you remember?
We would estimate in percentage what the likelihood would be of us getting married.
Yeah. It was like a probability check-in.
Yeah. And that score would creep up.
Yeah.
A little bit over the weeks.
Yeah. I think it always went up. I don't remember the percentages ever dipping.
Yeah.
It was on a steady climb on the accelerated program. But yeah, 3-4 weeks into our courtship, your family came down to visit, so I met the future in-laws. So by the end of March, we were pretty serious, and then sometime around the end of March, I don't know exactly what her wedding date is. Allison, you can tell us in the comments what your wedding anniversary is, for the record. But we went to Allison and Mark's wedding, and I caught Allison's bouquet. So I was definitely the next to get married. So anyway, I had forgotten this. I just read it in my journal this morning. March 30th, we were talking on the phone. It was a work day, and we were talking on the phone at lunch, and you said to me, Dara, I think you should pray about what you would say if I ask you to marry me. So that was a pretty big hint. I was 27, about to turn 28, and a lot of my friends had gotten married, and I was seeing their engagements and how long it took to plan things. So I was really worried about the fact that when I would ask Ian during these probability conversations, one of them I asked, how long of an engagement do you think we should have? And he said a month.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about all the planning stuff of the wedding.
You didn't care about that.
You just get married.
Yeah.
I mean, what else? What more is there to it?
Yeah. Once you decide, just go ahead, get married. So I was worried about all the planning and timeline and particulars, just having seen, especially my friend Lisa, a coworker at Nestle, she was going through all these details. I'm like, whoa, how am I ever going to get all that stuff done in a month? So here's the part of the story, well, one of the many parts of the story that makes me sound bad. Once we were clearly very serious, and I did drop the hint to Ian that I wanted to be surprised. I'm like, when we get engaged, I want it to be a real engagement, not just we're sitting there some night over hamburgers and you say, so you want to get married or what? Like, no, I want to have a real proposal and it needs to be a surprise. But then I also told him that I'm really hard to surprise. So like as a teenager, when my parents gave me a surprise party, they had it a month before my birthday because that's the only way to surprise me. So Ian, we spent so much time together and I'm extremely observant. So I would like see things. I'm like, what's that bag in your back seat? He's like, I bought some socks. And it's like, no, it wasn't socks. It was something with regard to this proposal he was planning. But I didn't know that. I'm away on a business trip and you talk to me and you say, Dara, why don't you choose where you would like to go to dinner on Friday night? And I'm like thinking, that's weird. Ian never plans that far ahead and, makes a reservation at a restaurant. That's highly suspicious. So my favorite restaurant in Glendale was Far Niente. I think it's closed now, but it's a great Italian restaurant. So we went there, and I'm like, leading up to it, I'm telling my friends, this is it. I told my friend Allison, among others, I'm like, this is it. Ian is proposing on Friday night. We're going out to this nice dinner. It's going to happen. And of course, I'd heard all the stories about how people got their proposals. It comes in a fortune cookie after dinner. There's a ring in the cheesecake, da-da-da-da. So I'm like, you open up your menu and there's a will you marry me in it. So I'm like, every single thing, the whole dinner, I'm just like waiting.
She's on pins and needles.
I was on pins and needles.
Yeah.
Nothing. Just a normal dinner. And I kept saying to Ian after dinner, so what do you want to do now? What do you want to do now? It's after dinner. I'm like, so what do you want to do now? And he's like, I don't know, we want to like rent a movie or something? And I'm thinking, let's go for a drive up in the hills and look at the lights of the city. He's like, no, why don't we just go back to your apartment, rent a movie? So we went and got a VHS movie of, I think it was this really gripping thriller, Presumed Innocent. So it was like, not exactly.
Yeah, it just added to the tension.
Exactly. It was not a rom-com. It was one of these really suspenseful, stressful movies. So we get back here. We get back to my apartment. We're sitting on my couch, and I read this in my journal this morning. I said to you, so what do you want to do now? And Ian just looks at me innocently and like, watch the movie we just rented. And so then I'm like on the brink of tears. He's like, why? What do you want to do? And I say, well, I kind of wanted to get engaged. So Ian, I had forgotten this part, but as the journal records, it took him a second. I basically just knocked the wind out of him with saying that. It took him a second. Then he put his head back, shut his eyes, and whined in a pained way. Why do we have to get engaged tonight? I really love you, but I'm not ready yet. I need a little more time. You said you wanted me to do the proposing, so you need to let me do this when I'm ready. After that, he said more drivel about how we really hadn't gone out that long, etc., etc. And of course, we hadn't. It was May 10th, and our first date was February 21st. So we hadn't gone out that long, but we were on the accelerated program. So then I was really, really mad, mostly at myself because I had, ruined the surprise. I was really disappointed because Ian wasn't ready. And so then that was just embarrassing and mortifying that here, he was afraid of commitment, and I was just ruining everything by going and saying, oh, I want to get engaged. So at that point, I did the only thing I could do, which was run in the other room and sob. And Ian,
of course, I felt really, really bad.
Yeah, he felt horrible. So Ian's like, Dara, can we just finish watching this movie and then we'll talk about everything in the morning? So he calmed me down. I'm like, okay. So we finished watching the movie. I go to sleep and I just fall asleep immediately into a deep, deep sleep. And then what seems like 5 minutes later, I hear Ian's voice in...
And I had a key to her apartment that she'd given me so I could study for the CPA exam while she was away on a
business trip. Yeah, so he was because he lived with roommates, so he would come to my apartment because I lived alone. He would come to my apartment where it was quiet to study. So he had a key to my apartment. So he had let himself back in. When I heard his voice, he was just kind of sheepishly saying, Dara, I felt really bad, so I thought maybe we could talk about things now. And again, I thought he had just gotten out to his car and felt really bad and came back in. It was only 5 minutes later. So he's like, can I come back there and talk to you? And I said, okay. I was really groggy. So jumps into my bedroom wearing a tux, full black tux, bow tie, and holding a dozen long stem roses and sparkling apple cider. I just looked at him stunned. And then I looked at the clock and it was 12:30 a.m. And it took me a minute with my sleepy brain to just calculate everything. I'm like, wait a minute. He's planned this all along. There's no way to get a tux in the middle of the night or roses or all of this stuff. He has obviously planned this whole thing to surprise me, and I just had to ruin it. And so as soon as my sleepy brain figured that out, I just started laughing hysterically for like 10 minutes straight.
And here I am waiting for an answer too.
Yeah. And I said, yes, of course, yes. We got engaged on May 10th and we got married on July 11th. So 2-month engagement, and it was so much to do. So after Ian's surprise of waking me up in the middle of the night with a proposal, once I fully woke up, I said, I have a surprise for you. And so I took him out into the kitchen and dining room area, and I got out my receipt for the wedding dress that I had already ordered because I knew.
A month and a half prior.
Yeah, I ordered it March 30th because although I did have a refundable deposit, I made sure just in case things didn't work out as I hoped. So I had gone to Laura Ashley and just ordered a dress off the shelf that in a size that fit me so I wouldn't have to go through months of fittings. And I knew it was going to take 6 weeks to come in, but it would be, there in time. I'd just make sure our engagement wasn't really a month. I also had done something very bold or stupid because I'm such a compulsive planner. I had ordered not the wedding invitations. I couldn't do that. I didn't know when we were getting married or where we were having a reception. But I did order the envelopes. I ordered 300 envelopes. And so I showed those to Ian. How'd you feel when you saw those envelopes?
Shocked.
Yeah. So then we went about choosing the date. We chose 7-Eleven. We thought that would be an easy date to remember. And then came the tricky part, the reception. So I lived in Glendale in an apartment complex. And I knew people from church that lived in Glendale, California, up in the hills overlooking the valley. So that's where the really nice homes were. And I'm like, wow, it would be so nice to be able to have a reception at one of those houses, but I didn't know anyone well enough to feel comfortable to ask. So I did some networking, and we asked this one very nice woman if we could use her backyard for our reception, and she said yes. And so we're like, great. So had that all set.
We're both pretty frugal, and we didn't want to spend a lot.
Right, and we wanted to pay for the wedding ourselves and not depend on our parents to pay for it. This very kind woman from church said that we could have our wedding reception in her backyard. And she did say, do you remember her little exception, little footnote?
She said, the home's on the market, but it's been on the market for a while. I don't think it will sell in the short period of time we have left.
Right. It's been on the market for months, haven't gotten any offers. And even if I do get an offer, I'm sure I'll have a 60-day escrow. And our engagement was so stinking short. She's like, you'll be fine. So I went ahead, the minute I found out that we could do that at her house, I went ahead and I ordered the invitations. So the invitations came in the mail a few weeks after that. And the day the invitations came in the mail, I got a call from her saying, I've sold my house, 30-day escrow, and I'm going to be gone by the time your wedding is happening. And I was mortified. So no. So then some very nice people at church who also lived up in the hills and actually lived in an even nicer house with this gorgeous Mediterranean courtyard with a fountain in it overlooking the hills. It was just a beautiful setting with bougainvillea, with magenta flowers around it.
Yeah.
So they offered to let us use their home for the reception, which was fantastic. But then here's where the frugality came in. This was another terrible, terrible error in judgment I made. I'm like, most of these people, I grew up in Illinois. Ian had a lot of family in Britain, and we're in, extended family. We're inviting all these people to the wedding. We're like, not very
They're
many
not gonna show up.
No, not very many of these people can come to California for our wedding, especially on this short notice, and it was just so far to travel. So we're like, you know what? We don't need to order 300 new invitations. We'll just order invitations for the people that have any chance of coming, actually, the wedding. And then we'll send the wrong invitations with the wrong reception address to the other people that really just want a wedding announcement. So that was the stupid decision I made. And so the new invitations came. We segmented everything into 2 groups. If it was Illinois friends of my parents or British extended family and friends that weren't going to come to California, we would just send them the incorrect address invitations.
Because we were planning on having receptions in Illinois and England anyway.
Our wedding plans came together quickly, and everything was great for the wedding. We got married on that Saturday in the morning, and it rained, which was bizarre because
it never rains in Southern California.
Especially not that in July.
Not in July.
It's a drought. Every year it's a drought. And so I remember being there on the 11th of July and it's raining, thinking, what? We're having an outdoor reception like this and we're taking all of our photos outdoor. This can't be happening. But anyway, by the time that we took our wedding photos outside, it was not raining. It was just cloudy and perfect, and the pictures were fine. And they wiped off all the rented tables and chairs at the reception site so that they weren't wet, and we were able to have a great reception, and everything went well except for one little problem.
So I'd been given the task of making sure that there were signs at the original reception venue telling people where they needed to go. And unfortunately, I failed in that task.
And the house was empty. So unfortunately for me, when I'd been segmenting the right and wrong address invitations, I sent invitations to 2 of my parents' Illinois friends who had since moved to San Diego. So 2 separate families drove 2 hours up to Glendale to come to our reception, went to the wrong house. No one was there. There was no sign, and they had no idea what to do. So they were like, they went to my house.
And
they
this
went
was
to
before
the church.
cell phones. And
oh yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, they drove around to everywhere they could. And of course, they went to my apartment complex and were asking around, but the only one there who would know was my friend Shelly, and she was at the reception. So no one could tell them where to go to find our wedding reception. And those people were really, really mad. I don't think they'll ever watch this video, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I did that. That was bad. But other than that, it was a great wedding.
Yeah.
And it's been a pretty good 28 years since.
Yes, it has.
And Ian's a really good husband, and he's very supportive, because even though I started this crazy YouTube channel, he is still my partner in crime, my otter half, and I really appreciate that. Whether you're watching this live with us at the premiere or you're watching this later, please leave a comment below. For all of you who knew us then or were involved in any way with the wedding, the reception, the courtship, any of those memories, please let us know what you remember about all of that.
Thanks so much for joining us today and watching, and as always, do something good in the world today.